God comes up to you and says, after 27, 28 years, hey, you like those lessons? Would you like new ones or do you want to repeat them?
Right.
And then you get a new set. I think it happens every 28 years astrologically. I also think that like every 10 years nowadays, you can reinvent yourself, right? Because
Mm.
I also believe in soul groups that you and I have probably met. And in our meeting at this time in this space is because we were supposed to help people with something,
Right.
and the people who are going to hear our voices and be impacted will. And then there's karma. Like I believe that sometimes people come into your life and hurt you because you have a contract. Oh, you want to learn what forgiveness is? I'll be the person to teach you that.
Mhm.
And while you're in this human form, it sucks and it hurts. But spiritually, I have to believe that there's a reason and we giggle.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of the Soul Inspired. Today we have Holly Hughes with us. She's an intuitive healer. She is an award-winning author. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And also, she has done some work on a TED Talk. She's spoken at a TED Talk. So, first of all, thank you so much, Holly, for joining today on the show.
I am so happy to be here. I'm excited to talk to you.
Usually, I start each episode the same way, and I look at Holly as a person through your life, and I look at where you are now and who you were as a child. And I try to kind of pinpoint a moment in your life, maybe when things shifted. If there was a point when you shifted and got into the work you're doing now, and then at the same time, and you can answer this separately, who you were before that, like the type of person you were before that shift.
I think that I discuss a lot. I write a lot of essays about growing up and the things that happened to me and the environment that I was in. And it's really always about your environment and how do you survive or whatever, despite your parents doing the best. I believe my parents love me. I actually had an essay published months ago that just got, for some reason, attention on social media. And I got the most hateful comments, which was new for me. It was fascinating. I was like, oh, I made it. And I've gone viral for what I've written. So that was kind of fascinating. Much less hateful comments then. So, like, the basis of my environment really was that my dad's an alcoholic. So I grew up in an environment where I was the one who had gifts and didn't know that I was like an empath. So I would feel, and what do I have to be to make things better at home? And I grew up watching my mom trying to keep him calm. Right. So as a child, my way of expressing myself or having to process feelings that I didn't know I had the ability to express or the freedom to, I was a dancer. I still dance. Like it must be like music is for you, right? Like you have this feeling, this emotion, there's something you need to express. And I can't sing. Whew. So you don't want to hear me just sing that out, although I scream in my car all the time. That's me
Nice.
singing and screaming, right? But for me dancing, like I can do that. And before I had words and language, I also use writing as a tool to process things and whatever. So that was like part of my environment. But I have like crazy stories of loss that I bet you didn't even find yet, like in my life. So like I guess we say SA now. When I was 15, my house burned down when I was 17. I lost my home again to an earthquake at 23. I married and divorced what I call my abusive starter marriage from 23 to 28. And then really at that point at 20, I moved to LA at 23 and like was out there to prove that I could do it and be creative and have all of that energy. But for me at 28, I had a realization that I can't be what my father was. I can't work myself to the bone because my father's super high functioning, very smart. He's a chemical engineer. He invented all this stuff. It was amazing to me, right? But I couldn't work 20-hour days all the time. I couldn't give all my creativity, all my power, all of my worth anymore to other people. And I had to choose, well, who am I if I'm not all those things?
Mhm.
And I think really for me, 28 is Saturn return for everyone who's into astrology and the woo woo and the healing. And that for me was a massively pivotal point because at 28, I realized I had a temper. At 28, I realized I could say no and survive it. Right? Like I was so afraid of upsetting anyone that I twisted myself into all sorts of painful origami shapes and gave up all the things I loved to make others feel comfortable, which I would never ever do anymore. So I think really for me, it was an accumulation of all of those things and the actual realization that I survived all of that and that living in survival mode is really not living.
Okay, so I can relate. I had an alcoholic father as well. He passed fairly young in his 50s, so I grew up the same way. Also empath. Didn't really realize it till probably my 20s. 28, that's an interesting age that you put there because in the music world we hear about the 27 Club, and there's a lot of famous musicians that have passed at 27. They don't make it past that way, and it's
Mm-hmm.
usually self-inflicted. And so you think to yourself, if you get to that 28 mark, maybe you're okay. Um, because 27 it's crucial up till that age. Now, I guess the question I would have to you, because this is perfect the way that you set this up, is because you're going to have listeners of all ages listening to the show. It could be a 16-year-old, it could be a 78-year-old. Is If you're over 28, is it too
Mm,
late? Can you?
never.
It's never too late, right? So you can
So
change things.
yeah, in like I'm not an astrologist. I know fun astrology, or maybe a little more than that. But for me, there is this pattern in everybody's life. You will see your friends getting married, divorced, and having babies 28, 27 to 29. I mean, and everyone listening, just think about it. How many weddings did you go to then? What happens? Because we think that it's time.
Mhm.
It's time, but really, in hindsight, from this lovely place of middle age that I am in, your 20s, and what I'm teaching, like my kids or people who come into my room to get healing, is it should be a time of exploration and individuation. Because really, you have to pull away from what you know, because what you know might not be working for you. So you have to decide how is it that I'm going to use or yeah, be who I am myself and in relation to people and family and whatnot. But it's called Saturn return. And I also like to explain it like this. God comes up to you and says, after 27, 28 years, hey, you like those lessons? Would you like new ones or do you want to repeat them?
Right.
And then you get a new set. I think it happens every 28 years astrologically. I also think that like every 10 years nowadays you can reinvent yourself, right? Like as a Gen Xer, like my father always worked at the same place, right? He owned his company, whatever. So that's not how it is. I know people change jobs every 3 years now. You can reinvent yourself many, many times. You don't have to be singular, right? I am a healer, a speaker, an author. I dance. I'm curious. There's more than one thing. And in my personal life is personal. I like to keep that separate. I'm a wife and a mother, and I've been married like 20 something years like that. And our joke is we were married for 7 in LA. We count them in dog years. So we've been married a really long time. And that gives you different perspective on handling hard times
Right.
and fighting for things. So I think that whole Saturn return is a pivot point. And I think for many creative people, musicians, artists, dancers, whatever, it is a pain point of frustration. I should have made it by now.
Mm.
Why aren't I there yet? I used to know the names off the top of my head. I don't. But there are plenty of writers who don't sell a book until their 50s, 60s nowadays. I think Martha Stewart started one of her businesses at 50. But when you're young and your whole life has been taken up by other, meaning school and doing these things and ticking these boxes that promised me that I would be here, it can be hard to get to that age and wonder, is this it? Like I'm a grown up now. Is this it? How come I'm not doing what I wanted to?
you mentioned also that at 28, you decided you didn't want to become your father. You didn't want
Mm,
to do the same things. And it's interesting you say that because, again, like my father also was an ism of alcoholism, but also a workaholic. And I know for my personality, I am very similar in the working side of things. So I'm curious because of the work that you do, if you're helping people heal and you're working with people, how often do you see people coming in and they're working really hard to get ahead? They're working really, really hard, but their health is being affected because of this, and they don't know what to do.
I
I'm just
love
curious.
these people. Yeah, I have a favorite story. I had this one client who was a really big deal. She was a really big deal. And when I looked at her, we had a conversation about, do you have to do what you're doing anymore? Because she was sick, right? She was literally exhausted. Her nervous system was shot. Her relationships with her husband and children were shot just because work was more important. And she was about to leave the country for several months to handle a hot stinking mess in another country that, only she could fix. And I gave her some suggestions and things to think about because when high powered people or really driven people come, we're fixated. It's part of how we achieve, right? I'm going to do this no matter what. But what is tied up in the no matter what? That's a whole ball of wax. That's a whole nervous system of things to figure out. Like, why are you doing this? Is it a passion? Is it that you feel like you're the only one? Or you're just trying to prove something? A lot of times we're trying to prove something. So I threw some suggestions at her. Um, and a few months later, I received a letter from her saying, I saved her life, I changed her life, and she quit.
Hmm.
Like huge on the top. Like, I'm not telling people to quit. I think in this day and age, I have to caveat, I never tell anyone to quit a job. If you need money, earn money, you can always look for another job while you're working. But
Right.
she had the ability to do that. And she came home and she decided to focus on the relationships with her family instead.
Mm.
And she's just like, I tell everyone that you just did that. Her appearance completely changed. That was a massive shift. So that was good. When a lot of time when I deal with very smart, very driven people, they can mental anything. They can try to outthink me, but I'm married to a Gemini. It's never going to happen. I'm used to jumping around. I'm not linear. I can follow along. So the interesting part of dealing with someone who is really high functioning and a thinker is to ask them to experience feeling and what does surrender mean? Because to heal something, you have to surrender that power that you think you have to
Mm.
be able to receive a something warmer and stronger, but it's less taxing, if that makes any sense.
It totally does. I also think to do that, to surrender, you have to break through the fear
Mm.
because the fear is what is going to stop you from actually surrendering to whatever it is you need to surrender to.
But
So,
you're emotionally intelligent. If someone's coming in and they're like, but this is happening and you need to fix it. I was like, if I could fix it in an hour, like, Oprah would know me or something, right? Like,
right,
I
right.
can't fix it in an hour, but I hope to gain your trust
Mm-hmm.
and let me like feel that story and like to feel your emotion. Cause part of my gifts is like, I'm all the clairvoyance. So clairaudient, sentient, blah, blah, all of them, and an empath. And like I see dead people, but they annoy me and they're usually really scary. So I don't like that. But I think
Right.
for me, when someone comes and they're all stuck in achievement and thinking and proving that they're right, I have to get them into a space of I can mirror their feelings because I literally feel them.
Mm.
So I cry a lot in sessions. And I was like, this is vulnerability. And it doesn't mean that you are still not strong. It just means getting honest,
Mm-hmm.
which is
And
super scary. It's super scary, but it's really necessary.
Do you have the same? So it's interesting because you were talking about the gifts that you have. So again, a lot of the guests that I have on the show have had near-death experiences, spiritual
Mm-hmm.
experiences. It's really around uplifting conversations, around soulful conversations, and using our gifts, and and how they affect our body, our mind, our body. I'm really big into Dr. Sarna, who talks a lot about the mind body connection. And he's not even when he's passed now, but when he was alive, he really didn't even go down the spiritual path of things. He really looked at how our conscious and unconscious mind affects our bodies. And it's interesting how you said you had this client you worked with who was in this place, and after she just made that decision that her physical appearance changed. I would assume that can also happen with people who have fallen ill and have different ailments or illnesses. And if they're going down a path that isn't in alignment with who they are, and they feel stuck, you've kind of touched on this, but you mentioned that you can't fix them overnight. But what is the first step that you do when you're working with someone that's in that situation? They know intuitively themselves that I need to make a change because I'm not doing well. And, because I come from the mindset of the body can heal. And I know
Yes.
that can be a little bit of a thing out there, but we're all built similar. And if there's one person that heals 100% from a stage 4 diagnosis, right? If there's one person that can do that, why can't everyone? That's the way I
I
look at
love
it.
that question. I mean, like
Mhm.
we can noodle. I mean, I can noodle that one for hours. I love that kind of thing. I'm looking. Oh, so anyone not watching, I don't know if you're just listening. I'm like looking into space because I'm having a conversation with my guide. So I have a blank spot on my wall. I like it that way. It's easier to kind of hear them for me. I think some people can. I know that I've had strange illnesses in my life, right? I've written about it, so I don't mind talking about it. I've had 3 miscarriages. I ended up needing a hysterectomy. I've had all these like scares. And so you would think that running all that energy or knowing my own body or whatever, I could get doctors to listen to me more, but I can't. They don't. And it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. So I think sometimes in self healing, you are also dealing with westernized medicine and who's meeting you somewhere else. Right.
Mhm.
So I can do whatever, but I couldn't do anything about the 10 centimeter. Oh, I shrank it 1 centimeter. I had a 10 centimeter like tumor in my body. I shrunk it to 9. It still had to come out. Right. I'd been telling my doctor something's not right. And they were like, no. Then they're like, no, you're right. It's like, why didn't you listen to me a while ago? Right. So I
Mhm.
think that is kind of part of it. Um, I have, hmm, I have had several people work with me and I knew they had cancer. Like I had a long time client. I tell this story kind of often. I'd known her for a couple of years, and she was on vacation. I saw a picture of her. I was like, "Ooh, uh-oh," right? And she's
Yeah.
young. She's in her 30s, and she had already beat breast cancer once, but I saw it all over her.
Hmm.
And I was like, "Hey, babe, I'm just checking in on you. Hey, I see you're on vacation. Call me when you're back." Because I wasn't sure. Because like me, I won't post until I'm home. I don't know. Like I wasn't getting nosy. Funny, I really know some things, but not others, right? So
Right.
she's like, Holly, literally, that's how she said my name. What is up? I was like, yeah, are you home? She's like, no. I'm like, call me when you're home. Just have fun. She's like, Holly. I'm like, no, see you. You're good. Go enjoy. Share in Hawaii. Go to town. She called me. I was like, okay, now you have to go to the doctor today. I'm like, I see breast cancer. It's really aggressive. I need you to go. Within a week, she had a double mastectomy and had a super aggressive treatment. It was a super duper crazy aggressive cancer. Crazy. I had that happened with another client. Another man had listened to me on a podcast and did a call with me. And I had the worst pain in my back talking to him. I was like, I'm telling you, there's something there. And he's like, no. I'm like, okay. A month later, he had gone to the doctor. He had cancer and metastasized in the spot that I was in pain. I
Mm.
had another gentleman come in my office. He's maybe 31, super young. I was like, I can't breathe. My heart is killing me around you. What is going on? He's like, nah, like I have health issues. I'm like, nah, promise me you'll go to the cardiologist. Right. And he's like, okay, heart surgery within 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So, like, I can feel things. So sometimes I don't think I could energetically heal his heart condition. So I'm like,
Right.
like I actually make people sign paperwork. I am not a licensed therapist and I can't make magic happen like that, but I can feel it. So I think it depends. I think it depends on the person's path.
Mhm.
Honestly, as frustrating as that answer might be, I think it's somewhere in between. I believe like when I'm sick, I'm like, okay, I'm meant to slow down.
Mhm.
What am I doing? Why is this happening? Like I get frustrated, but I find that I can't really read myself. And I'm just convinced that like before I was born, I was hanging out with God and we were like smoking a cigarette and having a drink. And I was like, so like in this life, you know what I want to do? I want to have this trauma. Let's handle a lot of karma, right? Because
Mm.
I also believe in soul groups that you and I have probably met. And in our meeting at this time in this space is because we were supposed to help people with something.
Right.
And the people who are going to hear our voices and be impacted will. And then there's karma. Like I believe that sometimes people come into your life and hurt you because you have a contract. Oh, you want to learn what forgiveness is? I'll be the person to teach you that.
Mhm.
And while you're in this human form, it sucks and it hurts. But spiritually, I have to believe that there's a reason and we giggle. Like the horrors of this planet right now, I don't really honestly understand. I don't know. I think there's a lot of low vibration, and that's utterly and completely different
Yeah.
than what I mean by like soul group and healing that way.
I completely agree with the whole soul group concept, though, especially since running this podcast. I'll tell you, because this podcast that I started, it kind of came out of nowhere. And when I decided to do it, I just went all hands on deck kind of thing, just went right in. And I can't tell you, including yourself, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but it's gotten to a point where I just think it, feel it, and I just kind of move on. But the person will come up, I'll meet them for the first time, be like, oh, I know that person. Like there's this remembrance or familiarity that's happening quite often to me. So I'm like, wow, I don't know how many podcast episodes I'll be doing over the period of this time, but I think I'm going to be seeing a lot of people that I've made these contracts with or something, and I really do believe in it. I can't. There's so many times where I've met people in my life, and I immediately feel familiar to them, and then there's other people where there's no familiarity. So I
Mm-hmm.
know, and that's what I mean. That's how I kind of determine it. It's not. I'm not just thinking about that with everybody. It's certain people. And so I agree with everything you're saying. The reason I brought up the mind body thing is because there's been ailments I've had. Mine seems to be always around tension and stuff, just if I stress, muscle tension, getting pain, aches and pains, general aches and pains and stuff. But there's different things that I've had where the first thing that comes to me is um you're not on your path. It's not that I'm not on my path, but it's here's a remembrance to get
Mm-hmm.
back on the path. And then as I do that and I start working and I start talking to myself and saying, um, some of those ailments have just disappeared, just gone, just gone. And I'm not here to tell everybody if you have something wrong with you to not see a doctor. Seek a doctor if you think something is really going on. But there is that part of it that happens, and people go through that, and it's kind of like that thing people don't talk about. "Oh, I had this thing this one time, and it just kind of went away."
Mm-hmm.
But why? What did you change? What were you feeling inside? Trust your gut, trust your instinct. And I guess that's what I was kind of alluding to.
Yeah, I like
I know
that.
you were talking kind of more of the real serious stuff that needs to be
Mm-hmm.
handled pretty quickly, which is incredible that you can pick up on those things. I don't think I'd want that gift. Sorry.
Yeah, it's
I feel,
intense. It's intense.
yeah.
I keep like I'm looking. You're so easy to read. I'm really just trying not to read you in
Oh
public because
no.
whatever. But like for me, sometimes I feel like your guides literally take you and move direction. So I don't know. You get pinches here in your shoulders, and it's for me, it's around your waist, and I feel like they literally are trying to move you sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel directed a lot because sometimes I just give it over. I remember there was one time where, speaking to any of the audience out there, I had a job I really didn't like. It paid well, but I just really didn't like it. And I went in my car, and at the time I had I'm not super religious, but I had this like crucifix this on my in my car, and I just put my hand on it, and it was just the way I connected, and I said, I'm giving myself over at this point. I've had enough. It's enough, and I'm releasing that hold that I'm taking on myself and just direct me. Just direct me. And there were a number of things that happened, some of them quite painful to deal with, and other things that weren't as bad, but it led me in this other direction. And it started my music school and all the things I do that way. But my point is I had that moment of clarity, of
Mm-hmm.
releasing or letting go of some kind of hold. I think we go
Surrender. That's
yeah, surrender.
surrender.
And I think we go through that at different points. I think I'm getting close to that with something else in my life too. And I think you have to be really real with yourself, because if you don't, I think it can lead to um issues in your life. It doesn't always mean health ailments, but for some people it is. Other people it could be, mental states, mental health related stuff, where you
For
can't seem to
sure.
kind of get out of the dark. And I guess if you're intuitive, so this is really interesting because you're helping people through these things, but you use your intuition and your gifts. Do you rely mainly on the intuitive gift, or do you listen to the person's story and try to relate to those what they're going through to give them that kind of nudge to what they should be doing?
So as they speak, I tune into them. Does that make so like the more we talk, I like to say I tune into your radio dial. I mean, some things I know by looking at people, like some people I'm like, I can't go near you. Like I'll know that, right? Like
Right.
we're not on the same vibration, we're not the same thing. I think people like to tell me their story, and sometimes I spend a lot of time helping them let go of the story, because the story then defines them, but it's not the most important thing. You're holding on to the trauma and not moving to the healing. Sometimes when I do energy work, I counsel people, please don't reach back for the energy that I just cleared. Because if you're used to having anxiety around you, if you're used to being worried and insecure or afraid, and I clear that, and then you have space to create, and you have space to feel joy, and you have space to dream, a new
Mm.
thing, attract something into your life. And you're like, wait a second, I don't feel anxious. I am completely uncomfortable without that feeling that I hate. So I'm going to reach back out and recreate the drama. Like I like to tell people also, this is super fascinating. Maybe this happened in your old job that you left, that whatever your family dynamic that you didn't heal is going to show up at work.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. How energy will it's the same concept too, where if you're going through something in your life, let's say you have someone in your life that's really yeah, they're just not a good energy to have, but you don't actually deal with that energy. You just either let go of the person, you quit your job because you hate your boss and you can't stand them. You're like, okay, good, I'm out of there. I find a lot of times if you don't handle it correctly, that boss is going to show back up. It's just a different person. And then you're
Yes.
dealing, and it's like at least for me, I immediately recognize that person or that energy again. And I go, oh my God. Okay. So how do I got to handle this in a different way? So it's the same thing like what you just said. If you have it in your family when you're younger, it could show up if you haven't dealt with it. So my question to you is, because I looked at a little bit of what you do, and one of the things it said that
Mhm.
you were really good at or helping people with was helping them find their true self. So if you're helping them find their true self, how do they go in? What kind of tools do you use to go in and dig in and heal those wounds they had from childhood or from different moments in their life if they haven't dealt with that? Like where do they go? Where do they have to go internally for that?
Oh, that's a fascinating. I love how you ask questions. This is so fun. It really depends on the person and the personality. Sometimes, if people are super vulnerable, it's just giving them a safe space to be emotional, because most
Okay.
of them didn't have that.
Right.
Right. So to actually be able to grieve something, right. And then to be honest, I'm really about honesty is my hot button. Like if you're a liar with me, I just can't. Right. So I think in my room, being able to be emotionally honest and vulnerable and but direct. But as you can tell, I'm a pretty like direct person. So like what you see here is what you get in the room, except I'm a little more vulnerable, so I'm softer. But if we're having a conversation, I'm still going to be like a straight shooter. I'm not
Mm,
going to string you along for 17 sessions to heal something if I feel like we can kind of accelerate it. I do think it's important to remind people that a lifetime of trauma can't be fixed in an hour. That's one of my questions now. If anyone tries to like book a session with me, is like, how long has this been bothering you? Whatever this is.
mhm,
And some people will be like decades, years. And I was like, okay, so like I bring that into perspective. And it's a process of, were you ignored or negated? How did that make you feel? I think some people call it inner child work. It doesn't necessarily have to be. It's really about finding what you value now and what you don't. And if you know
yeah,
what you value, then you know that this holding on to this thing is not what you want.
right.
Then how do I let it go? Because, like I was saying before, kind of full circle is a lot of people will let the trauma define them,
Mm,
right? Like whatever hard things you went through life defines you. Now, I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying down times and hard times don't exist. I've had plenty. Like I said, like if you listen to all the trauma I've had in my life, and that's not even all of it. I don't know. How are you when you lose your home and everything you own? I don't know.
right.
It's not easy, right?
Mhm,
You have to like go through that dark moment of the soul, right? You have to really be like, I can do this. I can do one day at a time, 1 minute at a time kind of thing, and then get to someplace else. So when healing someone, I give them permission to be angry, sad, pissed off, say it's not fair, and don't let them wallow in that.
right. Yeah, okay, I see that. So because I have it's I don't want to say it's my opinion, but there's different types of therapies out there. There's the therapies where you go in and you talk about your problems you've had or the problems you're currently having or the problems you had as a child, and you're just talking about that. And I think there should be a place in that I don't know if we call that traditional talk therapy, but it's really just talking about your problems. And I think there's a place to do that. But sometimes I believe that if we just keep talking about the same narrative through our entire life, we just keep wallowing in
Yeah.
the same narrative. And it's almost as if, okay, now I'm, maybe someone's 47 years old, but something traumatic happened when they were 17, and they're still on
Mm-hmm.
about that. And yes, it sucks, but the real question is, how do you heal it then? How do you go back to your 17-year-old self and heal that?
Sure,
And
I can give an example, sort of,
mhm,
that might be more tangible for you. So you have to forgive yourself for the choices you made when you knew less.
mm,
So forgiveness is mostly about you, like you as yourself, than what, I did the best with what I knew. And that's really hard to accept because as we get older, we don't. If you are the kind of person who wallows forever and doesn't make change, you won't be my kind of client anyway.
mm, right.
Right? Because I don't like that. I give Holly's healing homework is what I call it. I'm like, okay, so we did X, Y, and Z. Your homework will be this. And it's really just to kind of change mindset, change patterns. It's to disrupt what they've been doing. And I love it. When they don't do it, they feel guilty. And then sometimes I don't see them for a while. I'm like, I'm not going to judge you. But if you really want to change, we have to figure out, I have to figure out how fast your pace is,
Right.
right? Because I can see things and know things looking at you, but I also have to discern, what can you handle? How much truth can you handle? How much vulnerability can you handle? And how fast do you want that change to be?
Do you ever ask people that question?
Which one?
How much can you handle and how much do you want to know?
Sometimes. I
I
mean,
asked,
that's
yeah.
usually, yeah, I usually like assess while we speak,
Hmm.
right? Like how far we could go. Like I'll just, because it's part of my gift, like I'll just know stuff. Um, sometimes I have clients who are like, you're pushing me today. I'm like, yeah, because you're getting lazy. You're not
Right.
lazy. You know what I mean? You're like, you're
Yeah.
just slowing down, and if you're not happy, in no part of my life do I want to be the person who just listens to you to complain. Many empaths have that, right? Like people will tell us stuff. right? As teenagers, probably people unloaded on us. When I was not good at boundaries, people would come and unload all
Mm,
their stuff on me. And I would not know how to clear it. I would not know how to have a boundary, and I would just be left drained.
right.
So like that's nothing that I want to invite into like my business. I'm a doer. I want you to be a doer too. What you want to do is up to you. If
Mm,
you want to be a person who spends their time, I don't know, like it's so hard to not be a creative endeavor for me. Like I have a lot of bankers who are clients and I have super creative people who are clients, but like what is the rhythm in your life that you're looking for? Right? So you're a musician. I mean, all I see is music and sound coming out of you. I so want to know if you have synesthesia because if you don't, you could. We could turn that on for you and you would see like things in color. It's so cool. But
wow.
it is like, see, I would offer. So I see that I can turn up the volume of that for you. If you
Mm,
start to see me for a while, or if you know me for years and you come a couple times a year or whatever, I like to say I'm going to plug you into what I connect to so that you get your own messages, so that you can start experiencing in the world with more senses. And then what do you want? If you want to be a mom and work, how many hours of each do you want to give? If you want to
right.
be creative, how much time of that do you want? How quickly do you want to do it? I mean, like me, I have 3 books completed and like I'm pointing to the floor. On the floor, printed out because I edit better when it's printed that I haven't had a chance to kind of get to. I want more time to do that.
Right.
The
Right.
creative mind is kind of connected to energy, right? You know that too, but it's also very different. So helping other people doesn't leave me much energy to do that.
So you not only, that's really interesting because again, yes, I definitely know myself as an empath because I coach musicians and you know, selfishly the reason I asked you that about, how much do you give, do you ask the person how much they want? It's because sometimes when I'm even coaching in music, um I can I can I go to the feeling aspect for people and they'll be performing and I'll be like that was great, but where were you?
Mm-hmm.
Where were you? Like your emotion wasn't there, your feeling, you weren't. And sometimes people can handle that, and other people are very like, hey, hey, you're getting into my energy, like stay away, or they'll come in and I'll be like, what's going on? And they don't want to answer that question because they know something's up, but I can
Mm-hmm.
feel it, and then I've had to learn to be careful and to almost like check to proceed, almost like a, hey, are they wanting this from me? So that's how I know I have the empath thing. I don't even know what you mentioned, but it sounded fun that you could
Oh,
turn on for me.
synesthesia?
Yeah,
Do you?
I have no idea what that
Oh,
is. No
it's
idea
when
what
you
that is.
hear sound as color. Well, you see sound as colors.
Oh wow. Well, that's really interesting you said that because I am big on colors. When I was a kid, I've talked about this in episodes. I used to close my eyes and I would tell my mom. I was like, 5, 6, 7 years old, and I'd say, "Mom, I see my aunt or my cousin," or
Mm-hmm.
I'd name people, and I'd see colors vibrating around them in my head as I was falling asleep, and I would tell her about this, and I think she recognized it wasn't like a typical thing that people that people do. And then she started telling me, well, and then she had like this, I don't know if she had a psychic book or she was thinking I was becoming this like intuitive, and she was really interested in it because she was very spiritual that way. And but then I started noticing I'd bring it up with friends and they thought it was weird. And so I turned it off. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it's funny how you just said the color thing because music and sound is, and this is why I say I
Wavelength.
do, that's why I do a podcast because I'm more audible than I am a reader. So
Mm-hmm.
everything is just audible to me. Like I love that. And that's why I always say like my episodes are like the chapters of my book kind of thing. Because it's like that's how I right now at least, maybe I'll write someday, but this is how I'm doing things right now because I'm all audible. But if I could do audible and see things, that would be incredible. So that's, and you said
All
what's it
right, here
called
we go.
again?
Ready? I'm like not even kidding. I'll turn it on just a little. You can like email me later, be like, what was that? Because basically you were seeing auras. All little kids are open. We all see lots of things. I mean, I like to say, like, I didn't know. Of course, I didn't know I was an intuitive. I didn't have control over it when I was younger, like I did now, but I got sick, right? So I had to have a hysterectomy. And when I woke up, it was silent because literally that's your second chakra in your body. And it was removed from my body. And so all
Mm.
of the things that I experience on a day-to-day basis went quiet because an energy center was literally removed from my body. And I was like, is this what people live like? This is awful. Like I
Mm.
feel things coming from everywhere. So I woke up from that and I was like, it was so silent. It was awful. I was like, I got to rewire, man. I got to figure out how to get back into whatever that was because this is terrible.
Mm.
I would say I can give you a tip for the people that you work with. So the ones who really can't connect, who I'm going to call, they have good voices, but they're flat, right? Do you know what I'm saying? I know you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Okay. So you know they'll only go so far anyway, and they're going to end up blaming you.
Possibly. Yeah. Yeah. It could be. Right.
Right. No, they'll be like, well, how can you make it better? Why doesn't it sound better? They're going to want external tools to bring that which they can't.
Mm.
So you can decide how much time you give those kind of people, and you can give them a tip to kind of connect because we know that most artists are temperamental, moody, and emotional because that's where our art comes from, right? Like
Right.
our creativity, like your intuition, being an intuitive, comes from the same space in your brain as creativity because we're open.
Right.
So like you can I'm like, oh my God, we can flood your studio. You just have like so many energies in there that are musicians. There's so much percussion that you haven't discovered yet.
Mm.
I'm like so curious. I'm so curious. I have studied African dance for like over 20 years. And you don't have djembes back there in my mind, but there's this beat in you. I don't know how to
Mhm.
explain it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So when I was a child, I used to, before I became a musician, I used to I would sit still and I would move my body
that.
to a
Mm.
sound. And I fear sometimes my family thought I like had some form of autism or something because I would move this, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it was actually me just hearing
No,
the
that's the beat I hear.
music, right?
Goom. But it's
Yeah.
more of for me and like how I feel it in my body looking at you, it goes
Mhm.
in, out, boom, boom. And
Yeah.
there's other sound in it and it weaves and then you have a song. I can't write music, but like that is whatever. So I think if you're open to adding color to it, it'd be super fascinating. And they're in the aqua blue, like cool blues and a little golden yellow.
Hmm.
That's what I see around you
Interesting.
in your
Wow.
all dark, funky, cool, moody studio. But like really it's full of color.
Right. Yeah. Right. Right. Wow, that's amazing. So you would probably do work with people who at times you feel they have gifts too, or they
Oh,
have
absolutely.
untapped gifts that they're not using. And do you encourage it to them to tap into these things more
I ask them
often?
if they want to. Sometimes I have
Okay.
people who have gifts and they're always busy reaching out. So, and I push back because I was like, I didn't invite you. Like, I will never read someone without permission.
Hmm.
Right. So if someone wants to come to me and talk about so and so in their life, I can only feel the energy through them, but I won't read the other person because that's an invasion. So sometimes I meet people and they're whatever their intuitive gifts are, they're definitely empaths. So what they're doing is they're reading the room.
Hmm.
So energetically, they're reaching out and it feels like fingers and hands on me. It's so disturbing, right? It's so invasive and inappropriate because you wouldn't literally touch someone like that. Well, I hope you wouldn't. Please don't. But energetically, that's what they're doing. And I'll always dead eye look at them and be like, no. And they're like, you feel that? I'm like, yes, and don't do that. Don't do that with me.
Wow.
That's my boundary. When
Hmm.
I'm working with someone and we're in the room and we're trying to figure things out, I was like, when they tried to push their agenda, I'll say it that way, on me, that doesn't really work because that's them trying to control and manipulate. So I
Hmm.
just try to say, instead of trying to make sure I feel it, just trust that I know what you're doing and that I'm trying to look like, is that working for you? Are you exhausting yourself? Are you trying to use and manipulate people with that? Like, what are you doing? Are you scared? Like, so I would rather get to the healing place of that. A lot of my clients have gifts that they don't know that they have, and I ask them if they want to explore them, and I'm happy to like give them some simple tips. Like I made a whole thing for like I'm a super helper, right? I'm like, "Oh, what do you need to figure that out? Okay, do this, this and this or try this or whatever." But it almost always starts with these two things: meditating and grounding.
Mm.
And so like, how did
Oh,
we get
nice,
all
nice
how'd
balloons went up.
that happen? How
That's
was
probably
that?
some, yeah, it's probably something on the program. That's hilarious
That's
though.
amazing.
That's funny.
Because I used to meditate but not ground because I hated grounding because I felt slow. But now I
Okay.
know much further into it that you need to ground so the circuit's complete.
Okay. Because I've been advised about both of those things, about grounding and meditating. Now, music is my meditation, but I am trying my best to get a little bit more closer to meditating in a different space.
Okay, so
Um,
you're defining meditation this big. I don't think that's true. I think a
okay.
meditation is anything that you do where you're singularly focused.
Okay.
So if you're a beginner at meditating,
Hmm.
then like I love binaural sounds. I always wonder if I say that word correct, but they're brainwave lengths, alpha, beta, theta, gamma, delta. There's brown noise, that's not my favorite. But those are a wavelength. And I always felt the most comfortable with theta. And then I realized that's the meditative wavelength. And I was like, of course, that makes the most sense. When I started meditating, I couldn't do it for more than 5 seconds. So start at 5 seconds if you have to. And I would go up and out of my body and see like things that the Hubble telescope. I'd be like, what is this image? What is this? Or I was like, who is this woman? Why is this Asian beautiful woman holding a plant? Why is she in my image? Like, why is she in my head right now? Google. Oh, that's Kuan Yin. Oh, those are the things I feel when I'm around her. So, like, when I started
Wow.
trying to air quote control my gifts and started receiving messages, I didn't know what that stuff was. That wasn't in my worldview at the time. So that's open. And then I had an amazing teacher for myself. And she's like, you don't ground. And I was like, I know. She's like, how many bruises do you have on your body right now? I was like, I mean, like on my legs. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, I don't know, like six, because I would walk into stuff
Right.
just because I wasn't in my body and I wasn't grounded, because being in my body felt slow compared to being up in outer space.
Mm.
And then I learned that if you can tap into what I call the star energy at the center of the planet, what happens is all those intuitive gifts you feel when you go up are amplified because now you're grounded. For you, it's lower bass tones, right? For you, it'll be those like again, remember I'm not pitch. Don't judge the sound, but like you're like
Yeah.
lower, not quite dig, but like kind of that low beat. You'll get different information depending on the wavelength that you are hearing. Have you ever done or taken or been involved with anyone who does like sound baths?
I have not. I have not, but all of this sounds really fascinating because, and I like how you jumped in right away when I mentioned about the music as my meditation and how you said it's, because when I am writing, when I'm doing music, I'm saying words that I don't know where it's coming from. And I waited until, my fourth album, I think, to really start telling people this type of stuff because I kind of wanted to take some credit before. But at times I just start singing and then I go, I don't know what I'm talking about. And then I go back and I listen. I'm like, oh, maybe some of that's related to me, but some of it's not. But then I really feel it. And I every time I go back and I redo that song, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm really feeling it. So it comes from somewhere. So I am going somewhere. And I know that's a meditative state for
Oh,
me.
you're judging. It's you're channeling your own muse. You have a couple. You have three in the room right now, but one is like looking at you. I don't know if your camera's reversed or not, but it's over there, in there, over
Mhm.
there. And the one's laughing uncontrollably, but it is you. It's just
Yeah.
they're translating it for you.
It's fascinating. I wanted to ask you something about what you just said, okay? Because I've been wanting to
Mm-hmm.
ask this from the beginning. For those listening to, for people out there that believe they have intuitive gifts or they have, something they want to kind of expand on or push a little further. We live in a world where from birth, going into school, we're taught certain things. encouraged to learn the way the world around us is. And the world that is now beginning to emerge more that I'm seeing is the work you do, the work that empaths do, that this intuitive stuff is starting to emerge, and we're seeing a lot more of it. How did you in your life, when you knew these things were going on, whether it was when you're a child or when in your 20s, when you decided to turn on these intuitive gifts a little bit more, how did you I want to know if you had something you did to just allow yourself to accept the gifts and not be feeling as though you were going to be looked down upon or looked as
Mm,
crazy, because it could, I can already tell you're a little extroverted in the sense of like you're real, and
mm.
that's great, but not everybody has that.
I'm actually an introvert. I won't talk for the rest of the day after we hang up.
See,
Seriously.
yeah, it
Isn't
doesn't
that cool?
surprise me. I because I feel like I'm an extroverted introvert too.
Yeah, that they call it that they call that an expressive introvert. And that's really what I am. I don't like large crowds. They drain me. Like, I have to be super
Yeah.
choosy. I'm not this open with all podcast hosts, but you've just got like so much good juju. So it's easier and you're open. I think the short answer is I've always been other. So I've never been the girl who had a I was never part of a clique. I was like, like I had my friends, I did my thing. I wish that I things would be easier for me sometimes, that I could like just blend in and go with the blah blah. 100%, but that's never a choice. Even for me, so I have been like healing, like been an intuitive healer for like 9 years now, like full time, right? Like before that, right, film and TV producer, writer, like all these other kind of interesting, not ordinary choices as well. And even sometimes it's frustrating. Sometimes, right, like I want to work with people who want to change. I want to work with people who are open to it. I live in, North Carolina, in the States, in the South, in a very Christian dominated, like, what am I doing here? This is strange. Like, why am I here? Kind of thing. And it can be hard and exhausting. And sometimes people's grief overwhelms me, right? All of those, and I have to manage it. But my mother literally asked me if I could do anything in the world, if I could still do anything and not worry about money at all, what would I do? And I said, write and help people.
Mm,
So I just think it's how I'm wired. And when you're wired a little different, sometimes you're outcast, sometimes you're not. Like I have some people are like, oh, you're so quirky. And sometimes it's so derogatory, and sometimes they just don't know a word because I don't want to be in a box. I always say, don't put me in a box. I'll take the box, I'll smash it, and I'm going to dance on top of it.
like it.
Right? Like that's
Yeah.
my worldview. I think there is so much low vibration, hate, and war and divisiveness, and social media only will give attention to awful things for the
Yeah.
most part. So we're rewiring humanity, but I also have this strange belief that it's the age of Aquarius, and so it's going to be the darkest before the dawn. And I don't know why, while I was having that drink and the cigarette with God, I said, yeah, put me on the planet then and let me see what I can do. But
Hmm.
it kind of feels like my personality. So you will be lonely sometimes, you will feel misunderstood. You might have few people who understand, and you might have these beautifully intense and intimate relationships that don't last long. And I think that's the path we chose.
Mm.
I just kind of think it goes hand in hand because also being in entertainment and working with celebrities, a lot of them are lonely. There's a lot of noise around them. There's a lot of this and that, and some of them are lovely, most of them are not. It's also like celebrity is because they have that hole of needing to be seen
Right. Well,
because some
that's what drove them. That's what
right.
drove them.
It's what drove
I
me there as well,
Yeah,
right? Like I need to be seen as good.
I can remember in my younger years as my music was taking off, I was meeting some pretty big people. I was getting some attention, and every time I'd get that attention, I wanted to run. Like I did not want to go into that attention. And so I said I would say to myself, I can't do that. Like it's just not in me. Now, had I had that in me, that drive to want to be heard and seen, and my ego was up there, and I probably would have done really well, you know. I remember I sat with a director, I'll call him, and he was pretty well known. And he said, you know, I have a friend, he was a big person, and he said to me, you know, if you're ready to do this, are you ready to go? Are you ready to get your stuff and go? And we'll do this, you know. And then he said, you know, who do you see yourself in, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Who do you see yourself like? And my feeling of, because of who I am and because of the fact that music is my absolute love and that there's nothing stopping me there, I said Adele. And he laughed and he said, wow, you really put yourself up there. And I was confused because he was coming from a place of Adele, and I was coming from a place of, yeah, that's where I come from. Like it's the same. But then when I realized the way that it was being looked at, I didn't want that. I was like, oh, I
Hmm.
don't know if I actually want that though. And you look at someone like Adele, and she's someone who comes in and out of the industry because I
I
don't
know.
think
I
she can
love that
handle it.
about
You
her.
know, she gets in and she goes, oh, can't do it. I'm out. And then she'll come back later. And so, you know, I'm, you know, it's great that she's done so well and she's amazing. But there are parts of me sometimes where I feel like she could have decided not to and done it a different way. And because the industry is like it's different and
Yeah,
you got to
they're
be ready for that.
vipers. I mean, when you talk about that story, I just see snakes, like vipers
Mm,
coming, right? So, like when I was in the industry, I went in there to be creative, but I ended up being like more of a line producer, nuts and bolts handling like SAG and IATSE negotiating contracts, yada yada, right? Like control issues much, just saying. But I wanted to be the one who wanted to talk about set design and costuming, and I wanted to get along with the cast. I didn't want to just deal with their needs, their all their needs that they needed to perform, which in hindsight I understand, but at the time I was like, drink the water. Just drink that water. That
right.
water is no different than the bottle over here. It's just a different bottle, right? But it gets stuck in the minutia. And what was actually happening was I would give my creative ideas to those who I worked for, and they claimed them.
Mm,
And then they didn't want me to succeed because they needed me where I was to make things work. And I was like, no, I'm going to take all my ideas. And I think that was again at 28, like a full circle moment, right? And I went back to like UCLA extension classes, which is crazy because I was working those insane hours. But I was like, I want to learn to write again. If all I
mm,
really want to do is write, if all I want to do is get these ideas of mine out, I'm not effective. I'm terrible at it because I haven't done it in forever. How do I do that? And so I just learned. And if like, you look back, just like musician, like I used to be able to play when my daughter was young and took piano lessons. I was like, oh, I'll see like what my fingers kind of remember. And it took me longer to like get it, but you're like, it's that same expression, but still words and dance are my best.
mm,
Like for whatever storytelling that I want to do. And it's so good. And I'm so impressed that you could keep yours, all your stories, all that music, all those muses that are around you, although that stuff that you help to draw out of people. I love that. There
mm,
should be more of that in the world. You don't have to just be on the sideline cheering. You can play both roles. You can
mm.
have your moments of music. I'm like, I'm not gonna like find your singing too, because like I think I know what your voice sounds like when you're singing, but I hear you in harmony, like even when you're speaking, like it's not just one voice.
Oh
So
wow.
it's pretty cool, and I think it's what you're here to be and do.
It's always felt that way, but you have to remember I was born into a time when the way I look at the way the industry is and I look at how artists are treated and
Mm,
I look at how many of them get to a bad place. This isn't a coincidence.
Mm-mm.
And so I was born in a time when that didn't look appealing to me. And it confused me a lot of years because I had this drive to push. I had people wanting me to push. People would look at me like, wow, you've really got it. So you should do this, this, and this. But I would know that and that would lead to that. And that
Mm-hmm.
I don't want. So it was a very it's a very confusing run.
Mm-hmm.
But I know looking at the way I've been doing things now that I'm continuing to do it in the way I'm meant to do it. And I think there's more to come. I
Oh,
just
there's
haven't,
definitely
I
so
haven't,
much more to
yeah,
come.
I
I
just,
think I'm going to give you a different perspective. This is how I work
okay.
in the room too, right? You're like, okay, I'm older than you anyway, but music had Napster and music has Spotify and music has way for you to still share your voice and own it and control it, right? You don't have to go through the machine.
Right.
Whereas as an author, I've won multiple awards for my writing and I get paid $100 for something that a million people see, right?
Mm-hmm.
As an author, agenting and publishing, for a $20 book, an American author will get $2 for the $20 book. The author will earn two, and 20% of that goes to their agent. So like that industry has not, I think hasn't really quite caught up to like what it could be. Although I guess there's Patreon and Substack and all of that, and learning that overwhelms me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, like, even a person like me who has all these instincts, I have all my fun social media. Right. I have this neglected YouTube channel because I never know what to do with it. And I actually want to find people who want to share stories and read them.
Oh, that'd
Like
be really
I,
cool.
right? Like
Yeah.
because like you want to listen, but
Mm-hmm.
like personal essays there are so many amazing stories from all these things that how can I help and do and share that? But like I don't know what audience there is. And then like everyone's like, well, what do you do about that? See, that's when I can't read. I can't read for myself. I don't know the
Mm-hmm.
best way to help get my message to places. I just know I'm going to take all my energy and like meet someone like you and have a conversation. And that feels so good to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like I like that because it's a back and forth and you're just like, you have this kindness. Like, right. You do. You have, I mean, I'm sure you have other parts, but you have this kindness and curiosity, but your musicality and your desire to express and help others express, I don't meet that very often, especially not at the grocery store or folding laundry in my own, right? Like
Yeah.
it's fun and amazing and inspiring to always meet other people who want good for other people without really an agenda.
One of my favorite things about what I'm doing now with the podcast is the collaboration of energies. I've for so long as a musician, just putting my music out there, I felt very alone. And when I went into this side of things, I don't have to feel alone. My last album I ever wrote is called Unity because I actually did bring other artists in and they would be like my drummer or they'd be,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the first time I'd ever done that. And it was a really cool feeling, but it was during COVID. So the album, it was hard to get that off the ground. But doing this, I get to meet all these different people and all of a sudden you're meshing energies and it can feel so amazing. It can also feel troubling if it's the wrong energy, but if it's the
Oh,
right
for,
energy,
for sure. You're
you know,
really just sit there and you're like, oh, this is not going to work. This is going to be long and painful, but we'll power through. It's
right.
okay.
Yeah. And you know, generally after about, a couple minutes, it's like the energies start to mesh. And then you go, okay, this is good. And it's something that's something new to me. I do deal with people one on one. So I've been doing that to a sense in the sense of coaching music. But where it's different is I've always been the coach, direct coach, and then perform. Whereas this, it's a lot of back and forth on the podcast. It's like insight and then there's like this, oh my goodness. And then it's just such an amazing thing. I would encourage anyone to follow those things, if you can collaborate. And I like the idea that you said about having stories told and things like that, because that you light up when you say that.
I know,
And
I know. So I'm like, I
yeah,
don't know how to. I'm like, see, it's bandwidth. Like, how much time do I have? Like, what's my
right.
priority right now? That's like where I'm at this
Hmm.
awesome mid place in my life. Like, how do I want to do what I want to do? How I want to do it.
You is the book called Real Not Perfect? Is that what's behind you? Is that the
It
book?
is. That's my cover. It's a picture
Okay.
of me, not airbrush. So it's real, not perfect. How to become your happy, authentic self. I could like, there you go.
No, that's awesome.
Um, and I came out during COVID. So yay.
Oh, did
Just-
it? Nice. Nice. And
it's
is
awesome.
it on like Amazon, all those things? Is it
Amazon,
on
Barnes and Noble,
Okay, cool.
whatever. If you want to go to an independent bookstore, they can order it as well, however you prefer doing it. But yeah, ebook, regular book. It is a healing session in a book, basically. I explain my gifts. I take you step by step, and I give guided meditations in it. I actually created a program around my book, whereas if you want me to walk you through the book and go dive deep, I give you homework every day and things to think about and what to work on based on your specific needs. And I do that like over 12 weeks because there's always a time where someone's like, I've already handled this. I was like, have you? Because you're awfully mad right now. At some point, everyone gets mad at me. I'm like, just saying we might have hit upon it, right? You know?
Yeah.
So that's always an
That's
interesting
that's
place.
interesting too, not to jump over to that for a
Mm-hmm.
moment, but when I look at the stuff of Dr. Sarno and these people who talk about the mind-body connection and how to heal and all these things, a lot of it is around internal rage and internal anger that
Mm-hmm.
we tuck away, especially someone like myself, because I am a very nice person. I'm like I generally am not an angry person. And if I am, it's I just kind of go silent, right? Like people generally know pretty quick something's up with Joe because he's like not himself. But that's something I have to learn, and and probably a lot of the audience listening is how to let out that anger without wanting to burn a house down. No pun intended with what happened to you, but
Yeah.
like like how do you do that with is the best way to do that is to speak with someone like yourself and to kind of work through your internal issues, or like do you have any like last
I
feedback
have
around
one
that?
of my favorite exercises I like to give people. And I mistakenly let a client do this in my office. They almost broke a table. So I won't allow this in my room. But a lot of people, including me, thought that anger was a bad emotion, right? My father was full of rage and I refused to be angry. Being angry is out of control. Being angry is selfish. Being angry is mean. Oh my God, the meanness of being angry, right? But really, it's a cue that someone's crossed a boundary, you feel less than, and you're hurt in some way. So there's so many levels of that. Are you angry at the hairs in the sink that someone left? Because you're not. It's really like you're not being respected or you're being negated or you feel less than, right? So, one way to figure out how you're feeling or to release anger if you're not equipped or feel safe or secure in to actually have a conversation to be like, this hurt me. If you're not ready, because that took me forever. I think I told someone used to bring me coffee and I didn't like the coffee. It was some fancy drink. I'm like, just cream and sugar. I'm like pretty basic when it comes to coffee. And I felt so bad about telling them that I didn't like the coffee they gave me. Like
Hmm.
I practiced for 9 months in my head before I said, can you stop? They're like, they didn't care. They're like, okay. And I thought it was such a big deal to me, right? Like
Right.
that's how much of a people pleaser I was. I was like, oh, I can't tell him that I bring my coffee because he's gonna think I'm a head. Like, no, the whole
Right.
thing. Like, and
Right.
even worse, right? So this is what I say. I want you, if you're frustrated or angry about something, I want you to go into your house and I want you to get the biggest pillow you have in your house. Usually if there's a woman who lives with you, you have €1 pillow, that big square 16 by 20, like something, right? You're going to take that pillow and you're going to walk to a piece of furniture that no one really sits on. It could be the guest bed, a old sofa, a chair, something softish. You're going to take that pillow and you're going to raise it over your head and you're going to smash that piece of furniture and you're going to say everything that you really want to say. It's not fair. Can I curse on your show? You blah, blah, blah. I'm mad. I'm pissed off. It's not fair. I didn't get what I want. I did the work. You're so mean. Why'd you break up with me? How could you be so mean? How could blah, whatever? You could say whatever. And it's going to be such a relief. Like you'll be physically exhausted, number one, because that pillow gets heavy. But then you're not holding on to it, so it can't become illness in your body. It
Hmm.
won't make your brain spin a million, 5,000 ways and you'll get to sleep. You won't be projecting your insecurities onto this situation. You're physically getting it out. It's one of my
Right.
favorite things to do. I video myself doing it once because I like to tell people I do the same things. And the pillow biffed me in my face and my glasses went flying. And then I was just laughing at myself so hard. It was all over. But if you let yourself feel it,
Right.
it'll go by much faster. And I
Yeah.
know it sounds super simplistic, and I know someone out there is judging me. I can feel it, but I don't care. I think you should try it. No one's watching, and you might like enjoy yourself.
I love that because there are people who even have these places where you go in and you smash
Oh
things and
yeah,
like
rage
there's
rooms.
rage rooms and stuff, right? And I think that the way you described it, no one really gets hurt. It's a way to let it out. If you have neighbors and they're concerned, you can just tell them you're just having a moment, you know. But and yeah, I don't usually have swearing on the show, so this will be
You can
fun to
bleep it
edit.
out.
Yeah,
Just
it'll
bleep it
just
out.
you're gonna have a few moments there where it'll get quiet, but no, I'm just because you're like, is it okay to swear? And then you just proceeded to
I just
anyway.
do it. You
That
can
that
edit. You can
no,
edit. This is why I don't have
absolutely.
a podcast. I don't have the time to edit. No editing.
I love how you said like you went so long worrying about telling this person about the coffee situation, and then when you did, it was over with within 10 seconds. And that's such a powerful message to people. We overthink and overfeel everything. Things that we think are a huge concern can be over in 2 seconds, and you worry about it for years. So you got to be careful with how much energy you put into things that don't belong to you. Like they don't that negative energy doesn't belong, right? And to
Yeah.
release that.
Oh, that really okay. Then I know we've gone over, but this is the last thought of the day for me. What I watch like online with a lot of really young, well-meaning people is that because their parents were brought up not being able to validate, name, and explore their emotions, gave this emotional freedom to their children, and it's boundaryless. That's
Mhm.
not good, people.
Mhm.
If you can have a feeling, and like I'll say like social, we'll blanket social justice right now, whatever side of whatever emotion that you're having about something, and you believe because you feel it, it's true. That's the first step on emotional on being emotionally intelligent. You can recognize that emotion, but you then, besides expressing it at forever, you actually have to process it. And expressing it isn't processing it because that's an internal thing.
Mhm.
I feel outrage or I'm so mad because I didn't get, we'll go to coffee, the coffee that I wanted from the barista. And I feel entitled to scream at them over a cup of coffee. When the reality is, an adult will know the feeling, will maybe know that I'm not really mad at them. This is what happened to me before. This is something I need to work on. Or you could be like, hey, I know you guys are really busy, but this isn't what I wanted. Do you have the time to either credit me or give me a new one? That's being emotionally mature. And we can't always be there. Everyone's screaming in their car about someone cutting them off. But I want to say to the people who are really in touch with their feelings and listening, this is how I feel. And they're very justified and they feel right. If rightness is about emotion, I'm going to say there's some healing and processing.
Mhm.
I'm right. I'm just right. Because life is the gray. So I would love to challenge people to think about how the world is and why it's so negative. Is maybe there you have to find the humanity in people, which is to reflect on your own feelings and maybe see that they have similar. And they're not just awful, they're just similar.
Yeah, and it's the same sense you said, the cutting off on the road. Sometimes when that happened, I told you I live close to a busy road, and that happens all the time. And when it happens, I used to immediately and I'm not perfect. I still have my moments, but a lot of times now when it happens, I think, oh, I wonder what's going on. Is that person late for work? Are they worried about their job? Is there somebody in the hospital they got to get to? Like I try to go more from even if it's not happening, it
Mm-hmm.
really helps me get over it fast. Like I've already moved on by the time those thoughts go through me. And I
I
go,
love
okay,
that.
good. I didn't hold that in my own body. It's a waste of
Right?
bad energy. So just let it go. Just
Yeah,
look at
exactly.
it. And I like how you said emotional maturity, like just being more mature about it. So, and that's hard for everybody to do. How do people get in contact with you with the work you do? Do you have like a website or anything, or where does
Absolutely. My website is hollyhughesintuitive.com. And my Instagram is Holly Hughes Intuitive. So is my YouTube. So that's it. Don't find me on TikTok. I really only talk about K dramas on there because it's like my fun, happy place. And it's like one of my little self cares. I tune into another world completely. But
Mm.
I'm always open to conversations. I love when people engage. So please find me.
The last question I ask everybody that comes on
Mm,
my show, and if anybody has been watching Soul Inspired, they know I'm going to ask you. And you're an intuitive, so feel what comes to you. When I ask you, why do we come here? What is the purpose of our coming here to incarnate on the earth? Why do we come here?
it's love.
It's love. It's all love. It's as simple as it is.
It is. We just like overcomplicate things. I think that's my short answer because what I tap into, see, like I'll let you see what I tap into. Can you see that? Like I'm getting overwhelmed
Yeah, I felt it when you said love so
when
earlier. Yeah.
that's what I feel. So when you come to me, I'm interpreting that it's so much bigger than us and there's no judgment. Like we're here for this strange human experience, but I think the most rewarding of it is connection and love. Money makes it easier, right? Not going to deny that, but I think it is about that kindness.
Mhm.
And I think that's what music and art is. It helps us feel, it helps us connect.
Absolutely.
So I am sarcastic and I'm very human, I like to tell people, which I'm sure you've heard in the last hour that we've been talking. But when it comes down to my fundamental belief in and why I kind of go through the times of being lonely or even scared myself is because I just think there's so much better.
Mhm.
And if I could just be a tiny piece, what a gift.
I love that. I love how you emotionally connected to that. And that's when you have to really ask yourself, what is it about love, or the feeling of love, that is so overwhelming? It's because we deeply know. We know deep down. I mean, every person I talked to on this show that had NDEs, not like every single one has said the love they felt was 8 million times what we feel here, which means that's the most dominant feeling on the other side, which is truly who we are. So,
Mm-hmm.
you get to that point so that when we're feeling it in the human, like it immediately connects. And just like you just did, you immediately connected to that and felt it when you
Yeah.
said it. And I was like, I want to dig into that a little bit more, but I feel the emotion coming. Um, and then you did. So that's the intuition I was feeling there too. So that was amazing. So
Thank you.
I really appreciate you being here. I usually turn to the audience and just say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe on the Soul Inspired. This is the whole purpose of why we do it, is to get messages like Holly's out and to help inspire others. I would encourage anyone to reach out to her if this felt right. And I want to thank you so much for being on the Soul Inspired today.
Oh, Joe, you're awesome. Thank you.
So